V Rising is known as a survival game with ARPG elements, but after playing this thing solo, I honestly think this feels more like an RPG first, with survival mechanics layered on top of it. So that's what I'll be covering. Not V Rising the multiplayer survival game, but V Rising the solo open world vampire RPG that you may have missed because you didn't realize what it was or what it could be. When I think of survival games, I usually think of silly survival systems that almost always annoy me. Hunger bars, maintenance, annoying busy work, constantly dealing with game mechanics instead of actually enjoying the game world. V Rising, when played solo, really isn't like that at all. It's literally just this massive, isometric, open world vampire RPG with base building and survival mechanics added on top to fully flesh out that vampire fantasy. When I play something like Diablo, I almost always eventually start wishing there was a little more to do besides just fighting enemies and crafting better gear over and over. I'm always thinking to myself, or often even telling friends, things like, imagine if these worlds had more interactivity, more systems that actually made you feel connected to the world outside of combat, a base to work with, or some form of minigame even. A reason to just explore beyond just find better gear and repeat. Something to break up the gameplay loop without feeling boring or tacked on. But it's like the devs at Stunlock Studio had been having these same convos or something like that, because V Rising feels like much more than what it presents itself as. The combat, the bosses, the exploration, player builds and progression are obviously still the main focus here. But when you add on things like base building, material gathering, castle management, big towns with NPCs, traveling at night to avoid sunlight, and suddenly, this game starts to feel like something completely different. It starts to play much more like an open world vampire RPG first and survival game second. The survival mechanics don't become annoying or take over the experience. They actually support the vampire fantasy instead of just interrupting it all the time. Your castle starts to feel like an actual vampire castle instead of just like a storage box like many survival games do. Going out at night actually feels important. Coming back home before sunrise feels important. Even organizing or crafting your stations adds to the atmosphere instead of slowing the game down, because what's a vampire lord without his castle, and why would you not want to be in charge of that castle and in control of it? The solo experience honestly feels like a completely different genre compared to multiplayer PvP stuff, because PvP V Rising leans way harder into the survival side of the game. Bases matter more, raiding matters more, your resources and gathering matters more. But solo V Rising, honestly, it just feels like that open world RPG vampire game that so many of us have always wanted. Really quick, I just want to say though, if you're new here, then welcome in. My name's Patty. I like to talk about video games that I feel like I can say more about than just beyond like a basic review. And I like to talk about the video game industry. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, then leaving a like on the video or subbing obviously helps the community and the channel grow. And if you're not new here, then welcome back. Thanks for coming to hang out with me. Now let's get on with the video. Imagine an RPG mixed with natural feeling survival mechanics, base building, a fully realized open world, amazing bosses, all inside of vampire fantasy. The focus is still on the combat, the player build, the enemies, the bosses, the open world, the fighting mechanics. That stuff is still the core of the experience. You're still constantly getting stronger, unlocking new abilities, hunting stronger enemies, slowly building up your character over time. But the way V Rising handles progression makes the whole thing feel way more interactive than a normal ARPG. Because instead of just endlessly grinding dungeons for slightly better loot, progression here constantly unlocks new systems, new stations for your castle, new powers, new crafting options, literally new areas to explore and new ways to explore those areas like mounts or flying around like a vampire bat. It gives you reasons to actually care about the world around you beyond just, where am I going to find the next better gear? And that's where the survival mechanics actually start helping the game instead of hurting it. The blood system alone adds so much to the atmosphere and gameplay. Different enemies give you different blood types with different bonuses, so suddenly random enemies out in the world still matter depending on what kind of build and buffs you want, no matter what level you're at. Then you've got the sunlight system constantly changing the way you move through the world. You're literally moving through shadows, trying not to get cooked alive, while traveling between towns, forests, camps, all kinds of crazy biomes and boss locations. It sounds kind of gimmicky on paper, but in the game, it actually adds a ton to the vampire fantasy element of it all. And the atmosphere in general carries this game hard. The gothic world design, the music, the lighting, the forests at night, the giant castles off in the distance, everything feels designed around making you feel like you're a vampire slowly taking over the world around you. The game lets you fully customize the solo experience too, so if you don't want to spend your time farming materials or grinding for any resources, you can literally tweak all of that. You can speed crafting up, increase resource gain, lower some of the survival friction, and honestly, I think that's a massive reason why the solo experience feels so good. Most survival games feel like a survival game first. This feels like an RPG because every survival element in this game just feeds into the immersion of making the world feel more alive and more like a living, breathing place. Traveling at night completely changes the mood too, and because the world is designed so densely, you're constantly running into little moments naturally instead of them feeling like overly scripted. Human settlements feel dangerous early on, roads can suddenly become a problem, random enemy patrols can completely ruin your plans if you're not paying attention. Bosses can run into other bosses which you can use to your advantage and have them fight and beat each other. It's actually kind of crazy the way everything interacts with each other. The whole map just feels handcrafted in a way not a lot of open worlds honestly do anymore. And another huge reason the world feels so immersive is because the bosses feel like they're an actual part of that living, breathing world that I mentioned. Some bosses don't even feel like bosses at first. You just randomly run into them out in the open world. You're like traveling somewhere, minding your own business, and then suddenly you realize there's some like terrifying vampire hunter dude on your ass. You wandered into an area you're clearly very not ready for. This game does a really good job of making these enemies feel like actual parts of the world and gives them some really good lore and backstory and reasons to be in the biomes and areas that they're in the first place. A lot of them patrol roads and camps and forests and major areas naturally, like they're literally just walking around through these areas. So progression starts to feel tied to exploration, which is always a good thing in a video game. And that progression loop honestly never stopped being satisfying because almost every boss unlocks something you're really happy to get. One boss unlocks a new ability, another unlocks an entire crafting station, another gives you stuff to completely change your build. So instead of just grinding for slightly bigger damage numbers over and over like you would in a regular ARPG, it constantly feels like you're unlocking new ways to literally interact with the game itself. You're unlocking mounts, you're unlocking fast travels, everything feels like a significant thing. But honestly, I think the biggest reason of all this works is because V Rising completely sells the vampire fantasy. I mean, you actually feel like you're a vampire in this game. Like you're immersed in it, you feel like you're that character. This is the first game in forever where I actually feel like I was fully role-playing a vampire, and a large reason for that is because of all the survival mechanics and because of how they make them just feel like an added layer to help realize that vampire fantasy. They don't just exist to annoy you or to be an added on thing. Go collect 400 wood. No. Feeding on different blood types depending on what bonuses you want, hunting powerful enemies for new abilities, slowly building out your castle over time. The whole game naturally pulls you into like a deeper world that it goes to build as you go longer and longer into the game. And it doesn't even try very hard to do it. It just kind of naturally happens. And the castle stuff especially surprised me because normally base building in survival games starts feeling like work to me after a very short amount of time. But here, the castle isn't just like a storage space like it feels for many other survival games. It becomes part of the RPG experience and the vampire fantasy you're having. You start organizing your crafting rooms and building out different sections of your castle, unlocking better stations, building servant coffins, throne rooms. Eventually, the place starts to feel like your vampire castle instead of just like a survival base where you keep your items and put your crafting stations. And I think that's a huge difference between this and most survival games for me. Because in a lot of survival games, the survival mechanics, they are the game. You spend half your time specifically going out looking for materials just to keep your base functioning, just to be able to progress. Here, it rarely felt like that for me at all. Most of the materials and resources just naturally came in while I was already out exploring, fighting bosses, clearing camps, and progressing out throughout the world, and my inventory just ended up being full with all the items I would need when I got back to my base. It never really became that, okay, time to go farm 4,000 wood for the next 2 hours. It was more like, oh, I already have a bunch of materials. What cool thing do I want to build or upgrade in my base now? And that changes the entire feeling of the game, because the survival mechanics stop feeling like chores constantly interrupting the RPG and start feeling like more systems that naturally happen alongside the RPG. You're not stopping the adventure to go do the survival stuff. Most of the time, it just all flows together naturally while you're already out exploring and progressing through the world. That's why this feels so different for me from something like Valheim or The Forest. Those games are great too, but the survival identity is the main thing of those games. Here, all the building and crafting and progression systems feel designed to support the fantasy of becoming this rising vampire lord, slowly building out his castle over time. Older RPGs used to have all kinds of side activities and little immersive systems to break up the combat loop. Mini games, housing systems, side jobs, random world interactions, stuff that made the world feel more interactive outside of just fighting enemies for loot. Now survival mechanics are starting to create that same feeling and that same, side activity to do, but in a way that feels more immersive and in a natural way when they're done properly like this. And I'm not saying every RPG now suddenly needs survival mechanics shoved into it. I normally don't like survival mechanics or even survival games. I play them because my girlfriend enjoys them and asks me to play them with her. But otherwise, I normally wouldn't even play these types of games. A lot of games would probably make these mechanics very annoying if they tried to implement them. But in V Rising, the survival mechanics feel more like immersion systems instead of chores. Enshrouded is probably the closest thing I've played to this feeling recently, but even that still feels more of like an even split between survival and RPG. V Rising on solo genuinely just feels more like an RPG first most of the time. Now there's also the co-op side of the game. Honestly, this makes it even cooler because you can just basically treat this like a co-op open world vampire RPG with your friends instead of some sweaty survival game, which is not an experience a lot of people enjoy. Building a shared castle together, hunting bosses together, exploring new areas together, it somehow feels like a single player RPG that your friends can just also naturally exist inside of. Just avoid the PvP, put your settings on solo RPG settings, and this genuinely works and is a full RPG experience that you can play fully co-op with your friends. V Rising really surprised me. I obviously didn't go into this looking for some hardcore survival game. I tried it because I love vampires, I love isometric RPGs, and the atmosphere immediately grabbed me in. That's what got me interested in the game, not the survival label attached to it, obviously. So with that being said, I think a massive reason this worked for me is because the game lets you customize the solo settings so much. You can turn down a lot of the survival friction, speed progression up, and basically shape the experience into the kind of RPG-focused adventure you want it to be. So instead of constantly farming materials most of the time, I was just out exploring, fighting bosses, unlocking new powers, working on my builds, slowly building out my castle, and everything else just kind of naturally happened along the way. I almost skipped this game because people kept calling it a survival game. But playing it solo genuinely felt like discovering an entirely different kind of RPG, like an isometric CRPG with added features and elements and mechanics that you could have only hoped for in older ones. And honestly, if you're somebody that loves vampires like I do, or open world RPGs, or combat systems with like a lot of customization and progression, or just really good atmosphere in a world design, then I really think there's a good chance that this game might surprise you too. All right, that was my video on V Rising. I hope I was able to show some people that this is not just a survival game, that this can be a solo open world RPG adventure first. And I hope that some people are able to see it for that. I'm really excited to see what's next from Stunlock Studios. And obviously a big thank you to all of you for choosing to spend your time with me here today. I really appreciate that very much. Let me know all your thoughts on V Rising in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.